Good.
Hi guys, it's me, Roxanne Benjamin again. I am going to tell you today about a meeting that we had and analyze that meeting using the communication process. Let me paint a picture for you. The meeting that I chose to highlight for this video was a meeting that actually happened last year. I remember it very vividly because I was the person that kind of promoted this meeting to start and sat at the head of the table and got to watch some verbal communication and some great nonverbal communication as well. So there was a meeting between our principals, special education teacher and director, as well as some different staff around the building and my teaching partners. But I'll get to that in a little bit. Before we start, I just thought I'd go over a little bit about how you're going to see me break down the meeting. I broke it down into the 6 different elements of the communication process. I'm going to talk about idea aiding. Maybe I said that correctly, maybe not. Developing an idea, message, or information to transmit to some individual or group. Encoding ideas, how we plan to send that. Transmitting, the method of communication, whether it's memoranda, closed circuit television, computers, face-to-face. I'll go through those in detail later. I'm going to talk a lot about receiving, how the receiver of the message that we were promoting at the meeting listened, engaged with it, and maybe analyzed it. Decoding, the translation of a received message into a perceived or interpreted meaning, and then the acting, what we determined and if that actually made any difference. I want to preface this with saying this meeting that we organized was maybe not the most positive experience, but I think it was a really great learning experience for me personally, especially in thinking about being a future administrator, about how I could set up a future situation like this to be a little bit more beneficial or maybe structure it a little bit differently. So, I also included the different types of cognitive thinkers and processes, just because I think that in analyzing this meeting now, there was some people that really evaluated and processed things a lot differently than others in the group. And so I really appreciated thinking about these and how to set up meetings for the future and in how this meeting could have gone better. So let's get started. The idea aiding part, the sender develops an idea. This idea for this meeting was really developed with the first grade team. We were struggling a little bit with some of our readers that were not staying on target with grade level goals. And so we wanted to know what we could do, what we couldn't do in terms of SPED services, least restrictive environment, as well as can we loop back in our curriculum. So we had kind of come to the point of scheduling a meeting because we felt like we really weren't getting some very clear input from our SPED staff, our SPED teacher that worked with our grade level particularly, and I worked directly with her in our reading groups. We were concerned about our kids' progress and about whether their lack of progress was acceptable due to the fact that they were special education, or should we come up with a different plan about how we're going to meet these kids' needs. And we also wanted to know more, especially me, about the philosophy of our district concerning SPED students versus Title students. This was my first year, last year, here at this district, and so I just wanted to know the vision or the idea that maybe our administrators had regarding our SPED students to make sure that we were making decisions accordingly to that. So this was not really an idea to promote, but really a meeting that was scheduled to elicit feedback from district administrators. We felt it was important for the whole team to be involved so that we would all hear the same thing. We wanted to hear information straight from the top. We talked a little bit in our textbook about that flow of communication. We wanted to get the flow from the top down and everybody to hear the same thing. So I set the meeting, got all the players involved, and created a meeting agenda that we would use with my teammates. We had the meeting at 7:30 a.m. in a conference room, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. But it took about 45 minutes, and we were not able to finish the meeting because school started. We wanted to look at assessment data and student performance. What could it look like? Talking about continuing education of reading skills. Can we modify curriculum? What about pacing? If students are not mastering some of those key scaffolded skills in reading, what can we do? And grading would have to look different. And what about supplemental materials and curriculums in terms of deviating from our common curriculum that we all use? In continuing, we wanted to talk about spelling, some modified word list, and also special education testing. When to test, when can't we test, age of the test, validity of the test. And with validity, what we meant was just that if this test is 15 years old, is it still testing what we need to, education has changed a lot was our thought on that. I think that this is maybe an area that it went a little off topic, and then maybe downhill from there in our meeting. We also wanted to talk about SELF. SELF is our program for students that it's a different tier, it's a different program of behavior intervention altogether. If the tiers of our behavior intervention program have been utilized and it's not successful, then we put them into SELF. And retention, what about that? How did our district feel about that, if that was a possibility? Let me paint you a picture. We met in a conference room that looked pretty similar to this, with about as many chairs because we had quite a few people there. It was the Family Foundations conference room in our district. Ooh, these were the players. This was my first grade team that was there. This is not how we normally look, but I feel like we do look pretty fabulous in this picture. This was us dressed up for a Spirit Day celebration. But it was really kind of our idea to put this meeting on all together, so we were all hearing the same information. As well as we had our building principal, the assistant principal, the special education teacher that was involved, the special education district curriculum director, and the Title I teacher. As you can see, there were a lot of people involved, and maybe that would be a point of reflection for the next meeting if we ever needed to schedule one. So some encoding. What we worked on is we determined the meeting, invited the key players. I emailed out the agenda to everybody before the meeting would take place, just to give them a preview of what we would talk about, and the meeting begins. We started to discuss the agenda a little bit. The principal introduced the meeting, and I started to take off with some of the agenda points. Talked about the feedback that we wanted from students, a little bit of dibbles. We did start to follow the meeting agenda at this point, and I've included on these different aspects of the meeting some nonverbal communication that I remember specifically witnessing. We were all pretty serious. There was not much smiling. The eyes were pretty much on whoever was talking. They flowed between the principal to me and to some other teachers that offered a few scattered comments as we began to discuss. We were in the personal social zone as well. We were in pretty close proximity with each other as we talked about these points. Transmitting. The way we decided to transmit these ideas was a face-to-face interaction. We set this up through email, but we wanted to meet face-to-face. Some barriers, I think, to this were that maybe this face-to-face meeting, having so many people from the district, the upper echelon maybe, or the administrators there, it might have put some people on edge. This was not a meeting to attack anybody. It was really just a meeting to inform us how we could do our job better. There were probably some preconceived notions coming into the meeting from different people and different philosophies also that would be coming in, and there's backstory. And I think that this is one thing that maybe I underestimated, was the existing relationships that all of the teachers and all of the players already had with each other coming into the meeting as well. So we began receiving, and really it wasn't really just one main person transmitting an idea, but it was more of an exchange of conversation back and forth. Somewhere in the receiving phase, things went a little bit wrong. I think maybe one place that, like I had mentioned earlier, that the point of the meeting got a little bit off topic was when we brought up just special ed testing. We wanted to know more about it. I feel like maybe the administration thought we were questioning the validity of the test, which was not the case. But But then from there, it took a little bit of a different spin. At this stage, there were some nonverbal things that were happening. A few teachers started to sit back and fold their arms. Facial expressions started to change from neutral to people feeling like this was a meeting about them not doing their jobs. I think the SPED teacher maybe especially, which was not the case, but how input was being fed in, you could understand how she could feel that way. And here are some barriers, just some philosophies, different ideas of how to meet kids' needs, and people taking some of these comments personally instead of objectively. So decoding, this is the part when we start to think a little bit about how they're analyzing the message. I think the message got a little bit misanalyzed. So the SPED teacher perceived that we were saying she was not doing her job. Due to the veered off agenda, admin team became a little bit confused about the original purpose for the meeting. Clarification statements from the admin, they were trying to make some statements to kind of wrap up the meeting. At this point, I was kind of more just listening. That led to a soundboard for other teachers to start discussing some maybe deeper philosophical reading approach in first grade that would maybe not be realistic given the certain expectations that we are held to currently as teachers. Some nonverbal things that happened at this stage, one of the teachers started crying. She did mention that they were tears of joy, but that was not a high point at all. I made some eye contact with the principals, kind of in a sense like putting your hands up, like how are we going to recover from this? The principal and I especially kind of looked at each other like, uh-oh, here we go. And there were some smiles too, but I feel like these were smiles just to brush over the issue and not talk about it anymore, not because we came to a common agreement. Like I said, we were cut short by the bell. So we never really got to follow up on any of the points that we talked about, except via email. Acting. Unfortunately, not much was achieved at this meeting. Decided that SPED would complete an intervention that went along with our curriculum, which is currently not happening. And we as teachers have increased knowledge about how to handle special ed and title relationships. So I feel positive about that. I know that from the meeting, I didn't feel great about it, but I have an increased background knowledge about how to handle situations in the future and maybe just to work better and more in our team first before calling in people from a district level. Large number of people is not always the best way to communicate in a meeting. Communication can happen between people directly affected. Maybe we, like I said, made that meeting too big. We wanted downward communication. We could have asked more questions and made decisions within our own team. Cognitive styles, I think it was really clear, just in teachers' reactions and other individual reactions, that people process information in different ways, and also just a greater need for horizontal communication. I know that our admin, after working with them, they like for teachers to feel value in making their own decisions, and so we did need some answers from them, but this really helped my team and I come to a conclusion on the matter ourselves. So that is the conclusion to my presentation. Like I said, it was maybe not the best meeting